Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Few Connect Live for a Wednesday afternoon. It is officially 2 minutes past 12, which is our official kickoff time. So just a little bit of admin before we get things underway. There are a bunch of people still floating through. So if you are joining us on the Zoom call today, your microphones are muted by default. Your cameras, though, are turned off, but please feel free to turn your cameras on. Today is all about connecting and sharing. There is a chat facility within Zoom. Please feel free to use that chat. Questions, comments, anything you would like to share with our awesome community, please feel free to do so there. For those joining us on YouTube Live or on Facebook Live, I can see a bunch of people that are tuned into both of those channels. There is a chat facility within both those channels that you can use to ask any questions of the guests. For those on the Zoom call, there is an opportunity to turn your cameras on, turn your microphones on, and ask questions of our guests, all our hosts, as we progress through today. 3 minutes past 12, Alex Trullo. There's still a bunch of people rolling in. It is Wednesday already. I'm pretty excited about today's guests and getting things underway.
Hello, hello. Mic check.
Yes, I can hear you.
How are we, everyone? You know, where do the days go? I don't know. It's Wednesday already. So it's this strange time vortex that we always find ourselves in. But this has become part of our regular day as well. And as I say to everyone who's joined us, and of course on YouTube and Facebook Live as well, thank you so much for choosing us. We know that there's an immense amount of stuff going on and more Zoom meetings than you can poke a stick at. So we so appreciate that you choose to spend your time with us. And it's great to see, as always, Cam, you've said to everyone, turn your videos on, please do. We love to see you. I've got all these familiar faces that I always look for, and it's great to see you doing bits and pieces as you're listening to us. For those of you who don't know us yet, welcome. We are so happy to have you as part of this amazing community. My name's Alex. I'm the Executive Director of FEW, and that stands for Financial Executive Women. And we are all about the positive progression of women. We are all about support networks and really helping each other shine. And of course, welcome to all the amazing men who are in our community as well. It's great to have you here. Cam, how are you feeling on this hump day?
Yeah, good. I think it's, I don't know, I didn't like you. Like, where do these weeks go? The kids have gone back to school now. So that's sort of some resemblance of reality. And interesting that my youngest, Georgie, actually was sick yesterday. Now, she's only in prep, so I think she's having a little bit of an adjustment disorder going on there, and she didn't want to go into her class. And I feel a bit sorry for her and all the other kids out there, because school's such a massively important thing and a part of these young people's lives, and they've missed out on it for the last, 2.5 months. So, but they're back into it now. So, yeah.
So no more, you don't have to put them in front of the video player so they don't stream while we're on live. Well, that's
It was exceptionally quiet yesterday, which was rather eerie.
So we've got heaps coming up, which won't surprise any of our members and regulars. So we've got two amazing guests today, actually, who I'll introduce in a moment. As I like to always remind you, please do share this. It's great to see you share the link to these live streams amongst your peers, your friends, your colleagues. This is free to all our amazing corporate partners and their employees, guys and gals. So please do share this to anyone who you think will benefit from this. We have some truly amazing guests, content, and also what I'd say is, for all of you incredible people who are here, don't forget that you can interact, chat, ask questions, comment. So you're an engaged bunch, but don't forget that this is a really great opportunity to speak to people that you normally wouldn't get access to. So do take advantage of that. To our amazing corporate partners, thank you. As I always say, we wouldn't be here without you, and it's great that you are investing in your female leaders and your female talent and being part of this community as well. Cam, are you there? Thank you.
Yeah.
One job, man. You've been going well for the last couple of weeks. Now, before I give a quick shout out to what we've got coming up, I can see Judith there looking as glamorous as always. So for those of you who don't know Judith, she is our founder. Say hello, Judith.
Hello, everybody. I just turned my unmute off. I know. I can't believe it's Wednesday. This is crazy.
It's every day we say the same thing. I know we're all feeling it. So probably a great reminder for our members that we've got Ross coming up for a masterclass on Friday. And he was on at the end of yesterday's session to do a bit of a quick insight into what his masterclass is going to be Friday at 12. But I think his session will be amazing because it is all about energy and nutrition. And he was talking about how important it is to get these foundational things right: what we eat, our mindset, how we move. And I know we all kind of joke about it, but we're sitting down a lot more. We're in back-to-back Zoom meetings. We probably haven't been eating the best. So I think Ross's session is going to be really great. He's an incredibly experienced trainer, movement specialist, return vet. He is a really awesome guy. So for our members, you can just register for that masterclass. It's at 12 on Friday. So we've changed the time of our masterclasses based on your feedback. So just go to our website and register for that. But of course, everyone else on our live streams, we've got an amazing array of guests coming up again next week. And tomorrow we've got Natasha Mandy. Now, Natasha is really great. She's very dynamic. She spends her life advising corporates and CEOs. And right now she's really deep in how do you make decisions without all the data when we're in uncertainty. And I think this is something that as leaders, we're all faced with. So that's going to be fantastic tomorrow as well. Now, for those of you who aren't yet members, we just want you to experience what it's like to be part of this community. So there's a couple of things that I always say here. Please do take us up on our offer to come as our guest to one of the circle events that Judith and I host for our members every month. And for those yet to join us, because I know you will, please do come and experience a circle with us. They're confidential group mentoring. They're an incredible way to build a peer group and also to problem solve in a very safe environment. And also we'd love to invite you to come along to a masterclass as well with yours truly, so you can see what 25 years of experience in business has taught me, and there's plenty of bloopers in there, I can tell you. So I'm actually running a masterclass at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so not too late to join that if you'd like to find out a bit more about that. And Cam, you've just put the link in the chat. Now, before I introduce our guest today, the one other thing which I've been forgetting to do is that a lot of all of you, members and non-members alike, always say to us that you're really, you're struggling a bit in building your networks. How do I network in this current environment? And one of the things that I know Judith and I always hear is, how do I actually connect with someone? How do I reach out? I don't want to bug anyone. They're senior people. They'll be busy. All these things that we're really pulling back from building our networks. So my action for you today, and I did it last week and then forgot, is you can see who is on this call and who is in this community. Link in with at least one other person that you can see in the chat. That's all you need to do, because you've got the barriers are broken. You can say, hey, saw you on the Few Connect live stream. I'd love to connect with you. So let us know how you go. That is a great, very easy way to start building out those professional networks. Now, without any further ado, I'd love to introduce our two guests today. And I love it when we've got two people on with me, because it makes the conversation even more free-ranging than usual. So first of all, I'd love to introduce Suzie Riddell, who's the CEO of Social Ventures Australia. And as Suzie says, I love working on big system change. My vision is for transformations across education, employment, housing and beyond that allow more people in Australia to thrive, which is such a powerful vision. So Suzie, as I said, is the CEO. She's previously held the role of Chief Strategy Officer, leading the Strategy and Advocacy team. And she draws on her extensive experience in the social, purpose and commercial sectors to lead Social Venture Australia's systems change agenda. Suzie has led the development of innovative education and employment ventures, securing philanthropic seed capital and demonstrating impact to win scale funding from government. There's a lot more here, but we're going to get into that with you, Suzie, because you've got a litany of things that you've achieved. She was also the winner of AFR Bosses Magazine Young Executive of the Year in 2017. Now, also joining us is Matt Deeble, who's the Director for Evidence for Learning for Social Ventures Australia. Now, Matt has more than 20 years' experience in building and running enterprises in education and health. He was involved in provisioning the first internet services in Australian schools and developing internet management software used by thousands of schools in Australia, New Zealand, the UK and the USA. More recently, he's worked on data, identity and privacy projects for the National Schools Program and on online career profiling service in higher and vocational education. He's a non-executive director of the evidence efficiency platform Co-Evidence. That's enough of me reading stuff out. Let's get rid of this slide. Welcome, both of you.
Alex, thanks so much for having us and being part of the network today. Very excited.
Oh, look, my pleasure. And, you know, it always blows me away how generous people are with their time coming onto this, what now I call it a show. So in my mind, it's become a show that we keep doing. So first of all, Susie, welcome and thank you. And Matt, we've seemed to have lost your video at the moment. And
yes, hi Alex, I can hear everybody and I can see you. We did a good tech run before and as luck would have it, it's just crashed on me at this time. But I can hear everyone. I'm going to try and jump and fix my screen as we're going, but don't let me hold up your conversation.
No, brilliant. And for those who we did see, this is the thing. When you go live, who knows what happens? Oh, and there's Matt's photo. So we actually did our tech check and Matt was in an amazing black and white. And Susie and I thought he was being very artistic with a black and white filter, but no, that was just his camera. So Susie, tell us a bit about yourself and Social Ventures Australia as well, because I'm sure a lot in our community wouldn't know of you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Alex. So Social Ventures Australia is a not-for-profit organisation, and we exist with a vision of an Australia where all people and communities thrive. And we work in partnership. We work in partnership with not-for-profit organisations, with businesses, with government and with philanthropy. And we work across a really broad set of different topics. And that's because we know that lots of different things that people experience that relate to disadvantage are very interrelated. So our objective is to reduce social disadvantage in Australia. So think about the things that help people and communities to thrive. A really great start in life, early childhood development, a great education, a meaningful job, a safe, appropriate, affordable house to live in, good connection with community, connection to your culture, healthy people, healthy communities. Those are the sorts of things that we work on at SVA.
There are some really big topics there, so I really want to get a bit more into that. Matt, I can see you looking very 1940s in black and white there.
I'm calling from the past, but talking about the future with everybody today, Alex.
So Matt, can you just by way of intro just get a bit of a feel for what you do in the social ventures world?
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to be part of the team that Susie was talking about. And my sort of double click on that work from Social Ventures is in education. And the particular bit of passion and work that I lead is about trying to give teachers and school leaders better evidence and research to help them make more effective decisions in the classroom. And more recently, that started to extend out to some advice to parents as the education environment has expanded somewhat during COVID.
Mm-hmm. And I want to come back to that because obviously we're now in the next phase, if we can call it that, of because it's interesting, you know, when we spoke, it was a couple of weeks ago and already the world's changed again with kids starting to go back to school. So I want to come back to how many parents have actually been broken by long division. It's a safe space you can all share here. So I want to come back to that. But Susie, from your perspective, I mean, you've got, I think, quite a unique perspective, given the work that you do and that Social Ventures does around who's been impacted. Who have you seen that's been impacted the most during the last couple of months with the pandemic?
Alex, unfortunately, it's been a trend globally and historically that when we see big crises hit, that it's the people experiencing the most vulnerability and the most disadvantage who get hit hardest. So people who have insecure work, people who are already experiencing poverty, people with disabilities in many cases whose services may have been significantly interrupted, people who are disengaged from education and training. Certainly in Australia, one of the big groups that's missed out on a lot of support are migrants, and particularly the temporary migrants, asylum seekers, refugees who are not receiving support from government. And they were often people who were in precarious positions before the crisis hit. they don't necessarily have all of the social support or the financial reserves or the connection with others to be able to easily withstand the crisis. So they're the people who've really been doing it tough. And unfortunately, the research shows, for example, from Labor economists, that the people who are out of work before an economic downturn often fall to the back of the queue. And they're the ones who usually take the longest to re-engage with the workforce, and sadly, in many cases, may not ever work in paid employment again.
Wow. So, I mean, how do we start to even tackle this? Because, I mean, you know, in my mind, and I know we've chatted before, it's not just the government's role. So, I mean, we all have a part to play. Business has a part to play. So, how do we even start to tackle what you're just describing?
I think it's really important to absolutely emphasize that everyone has a role to play in this, individuals and certainly businesses, government, philanthropists, not-for-profit organisations. I think, first of all, absolute kudos to so many different not-for-profit organisations who have stepped in really quickly and adapted their services and the work that they're doing to meet often really increased need. So if you think about the increase in people who may be needing food support, for example, or those who are looking for safe shelter. Many cases, charities have turned on a dime and become super responsive to those increased needs in their communities. And they've often had to do that by changing the way they work as well, just like all of us joining virtually. Many of those charities have had to work out how do they deliver their services using all these online technologies? How do they safely engage with the people in their communities using social distancing, etc. So I think charities are by and large doing a brilliant job of adapting, and they need support, lots of different ways of supporting them. In many cases, financial support goes a really long way, but there's plenty of in-kind support as well. One of the statistics that is really alarming is that Australia normally has 3.3 million volunteers across the country working with not-for-profit organisations. And according to the Australian National Universities, 65% of those people have stopped volunteering.
In the last couple of months during this pandemic.
During the pandemic. And so if you're part of a business that has skilled volunteering, if you're an individual who might want to put your hand up, I think those sort of things to support your local community and your local charity make a really big difference. So supporting the charities that are doing the work that meets the needs of those who are really doing it tough. Absolutely helping governments to think differently and businesses to think differently about what systems did we already have that were working well and which ones weren't really working that well and need to be reimagined. And I also really compliment the number of the government responses that have helped keep people in more stable positions. So if you think about the role that JobKeeper has played of keeping people in work, you're supporting businesses to keep people in their jobs. Things like rental relief, that means that you can't kick someone out of their home at the moment, and you need to, whether you're a commercial landlord or a residential landlord, offer relief to people who are doing it tough. Those things provide a lot of stability in people's lives. And so one of the things SDA is advocating for is targeted ongoing support. A lot of these measures have been announced for a short 6-month period.
Yeah.
And where governments and businesses and organisations can continue that support in a targeted way, it will make a really big difference to people who are experiencing disadvantage.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? It's not just for right now when we're in this, the ripple effect. I mean, a lot of it we haven't even imagined yet, but the ripple effect's going to be huge across all the things that you're talking about. So I want to come back to this theme of what we can reimagine, because I'm really curious about, your view on, what do we want to take forward and what should we leave behind? Because I think that's a super interesting reflection point for all of us. Matt, so from more, I guess, the education perspective, what are you seeing? Because I know we were chatting about all sorts of things from, the future of education and also the pressure and the responsibility for parents who are homeschooling, jokes aside on long division, but also now I think there's a whole new thing that's happening now about kids are going back to school. what sort of support do you think schools need and parents? I mean, there's a whole, you can start in any of that wherever you like, but there's a lot going on in your space.
Well, I'd begin by saying it's no joke about how much long division broke me, Alex. I found with 3 kids at home and facing the task of thinking about how do I support their learning, even as someone that works in education, totally challenging. So, and I know that was true of many of my friends and colleagues, and I know this is something that we thought we'd talk a little bit about here. So interestingly, one of the things that, I don't know whether other people experience this, but I did, and we've had a lot of comment about this, which is the respect for the work that teachers and early childhood educators do went through the roof. We suddenly said, well, I used to complain about the fact that, the kids didn't seem to be getting the right amount of work, or what were their grades like. When you actually have to place yourself in the position of managing the learning and realising how much you have to do to even get that golden moment where they're sitting quietly and comfortably and they're ready to engage in the learning, has been huge. So respect for the profession is enormous. Interesting, on the other side of that equation, schools are reporting that the relationships that they've had with parents and carers has been stronger through the pandemic, and particularly for schools serving vulnerable communities, than it's ever been before. And this represents one of those real opportunities to take the positive from what's occurred and build on, because the evidence says that one of the best indicators for improved academic and overall interest in education for students is the degree of parental involvement and engagement in kids' learning. So schools are starting to say, wow, let's take that new kind of dynamic and relationship that we had with parents, where we were speaking to them almost daily, sometimes more than daily for some kids, and how do we keep that bridge open to build to a better future as they come back? So that's one idea that I think has been really interesting in the change. The other has been, obviously, for those that are in reasonable technology situations, the explosion of digital tools and technologies into the hands of almost all schools in some way or another is an enormous change. And it was clunky for lots of people, and it was really clunky for schools and departments suddenly taking what would normally be a 10-year change journey and smashing it into 10 minutes in some ways, it felt, for people, certainly over a couple of weeks. But a lot of that barrier breaking has occurred now. Parents are actually using some online platforms that schools can use and engage with. The kids are starting to become familiar with the way in which they enter work. And again, some emerging info is that for some students, those with special learning needs or those that were highly disrupted or felt socially excluded in schools have actually felt a lot better about this way of learning. They've actually improved.
Because they're in their home environment?
Right, yep, and they're not home environment and excluded from the school experience, as can often happen for kids that are disengaged. They're away from things that were problematic for them in the school, but they're getting access to good learning materials and support from teachers. Yeah. So again, one of the emerging conversations that schools are doing is saying, well, gee, that hurt, didn't it, going through all that online learning? But let's not just snap back to saying, oh, good, let's pack them all into the classrooms now. I mean, there's a problem with that with distancing anyway. But let's think about how we can use the online environments that worked well for some kids, and for those kids that it didn't, and there were a lot of kids for whom it hasn't worked well for, do we get the sort of best of both worlds in the return to schooling? And so they're two really interesting themes that we're interested in exploring. And on both of those topics, obviously, as Suzie was saying, our key interest is in, well, who misses out on that story? And they are often the most vulnerable in Australia. And it's not because of COVID, it's because of the underlying circumstances. So they didn't have devices and technology, or their parents had limited opportunities to even participate in their learning because of the complex things that are going on elsewhere in their lives. So how do we sort of bounce back in a way that supports those most vulnerable kids to make sure they're not at the back of the queue in their learning as we move forward?
And I see you nodding as well, Suzie. So, I mean, there's so much to this, isn't it? Because from it, we've had different, obviously, leaders on from different businesses, and everyone's kind of talking about broadly the theme of, and I like how you just put that, Matt. The barrier breaking's already occurred with a lot of this stuff. I mean, we've all seen transformation, whether it be remote workforces or some of the big issues that you're both talking about. So now that we have broken some barriers, how do we how do we not just slide back into the way things were? Because even though we know there's a better way, it's kind of hard and we don't have the answers, and the old system's kind of there pulling us back. I mean, that feels like that could be a really big risk, especially in the sorts of things that you're both talking about.
Alex, I couldn't agree more. I think we all need to go to your event tomorrow about making decisions with uncertainty, because that's what we're all staring into. The temptation to use the phrase back in all the language, you know, back to normal, snap back, let's go back to whatever it might be. It misses the opportunity to think differently about, well, what should we do that is exactly the same because it was working really well, but what actually can we imagine that would have been impossible to imagine before? And we've seen businesses, governments, not-for-profits, you know, our own households totally transform how we interact with each other, how quickly we can make decisions, whose interests we're acting in. You know, one of the wonderful things about Australia is that we have shown as a community that we can act in each other's interests. You know, the way that people stayed home and followed the guidelines and looked after each other, even for people who thought maybe I'm not so high at risk, I think is a real commendation to our community. Let's take advantage of that and see ourselves as, you know, more in this together than perhaps the media narrative and the political narrative has suggested that we are.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. And you're right, there's this uncertainty, isn't there, where it would be easy to snap back. And language is important, as we often talk about. That back and back to normal, I think, does imply that it's back to how things were. So what can we do? I mean, for you, Matt, and you, Suzie, I mean, you're deep in this every day. I mean, the community that we've got here, we've got such a beautiful community of people watching and listening today, you know, in a whole raft of different businesses, different positions, different interests, you know. So how can we start to think, to your point, Suzie, as this collective community, about what are some of the small things that we could start to do or think of that each of us can kind of take with us from today?
Sure. I'll go first, and then Matt, very interested in your practical suggestions, because they're always very practical coming from Matt. I think that one of the really interesting opportunities is about skills and what the skills for the future are going to be in Australia. So as we see more people who are out of work than we have in a couple of decades, the opportunity for government and businesses and just individual people to think about, well, what skills could we be building in ourselves, in our teams, in our children or family members, and in our communities that are going to be really needed going forward. And those skills, there's certainly a lot of technical skills. We're undoubtedly going to see a lot of technology growth, and some of those barriers that Matt said have been broken will just boom in the future around technology, as well as some of the other areas that are high growth, like some of the caring sectors, caring for people with disabilities, aged care, early childhood. You know, those are areas that probably need some more innovation and some different ways of thinking, and a highly skilled workforce to take us forward, given the demographics of Australia. And so I think if individuals are thinking about where growth is going to come from at the macro level, that will help inform what we're trying to learn as individuals and as teams and as businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, practical tips from you, apparently.
Well, I'm gonna start by not being very practical. So Suzie, I'm going to play against another way, but I think there's a really interesting call out for this collective, and it's one that it sort of builds on what Suzie had just talked about Australia's response. One of the other things I've found heartening about our health response has been the political and then the wider community conversation about listening to experts and following the evidence. A very big reason for why we've been successful here is that in a time of crisis, our natural response wasn't to jump to tribes or to the things that seem to make sense to us in our own lived experience, but we turned, and who knew as much about epidemiology as we all now know and understand, right? But we went, hell, this is terrifying. What we'd better do is listen to people that have dedicated their lives and are building on a knowledge base of previous pandemics and flus and other outbreaks to help us navigate the terrain. And I think that it has stood us in very good stead in Australia, and it's actually played through the political and the business language throughout the pandemic. I think there's a risk that as things start to head to, well, we won't say back, but into a next phase where we feel like the risk is reduced, that common or old tribal ideologies flare up and people jump back to previous positions. And I think an organisation and a collective like you all are, of thoughtful people with big influence throughout your own networks, in saying, gee, it worked all right for us on the pandemic. How about we think about some of our other big social challenges and see who are the expert voices that we should be listening to, and on what basis are they making suggestions about how we should change things. And that's something that, Suzie has championed inside our work at SVA, and that obviously I bang on about all the time with something like evidence for learning in my title. But we can do a lot better when we start with what we know and we listen to people that have dedicated their lives to build quality knowledge to build from. If we do that in lots of areas, especially inside education, and then we say, how do I make that real? Then there's a lot that we can do. And I guess my other comment for this group is those that aren't practicing educators, but who exist to support them through relationships that you've got with parents as parents and carers, it is firstly to be easy on yourself, both in the time that you went through during full school or full learning at home. I know we all felt like a failure all the time about what wasn't getting done. Firstly, don't worry, we didn't break them. The teachers will be pretty good at putting them back together for us. So we should firstly go easy on ourselves. And then remember that our job is actually being a support person in the learning life of that young person. And so that means firstly surrounding them with love and a safe environment. And often we sort of go, yeah, we've done that. But like that is the most important thing to do. And then the next most important thing to do is to build encouragement for them to take risks and build their own learning. And they sound like really warm-hearted statements. The great thing is that's actually well supported by the evidence. Yeah. Children who are building their own ability to understand and regulate their own behaviour become children who can learn concepts and content. And children that are getting regular practice and support in a stable environment at home build the basic literacy and numeracy skills much quicker than kids that live in more complex or uneven environments. So in a way, it becomes this easy message that says doing the things that would probably occur to you naturally as a concerned parent or carer are the things that the evidence says can make the biggest difference in their learning life, particularly as they navigate the changes that we all are in the world today.
Yeah, there's so many good points there, Matt, and I think you're right. It comes back to the things, we often feel like are the foundations or the simple or the obvious that you kind of dismiss because, well, yeah. But I love that you're both saying, you know what, that's the true reflection point. Like we need to go back to basics. We need to look for the wisdom and listen to it and do things differently. I know, Matt, that you've done, SVA has done a lot of work around home supported learning tools as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about some of those?
Well, this is my chance for a spruik for a product, but the thing I love about my products is that they're completely free and sitting on an open access website that you can all go to. So yeah, we pivoted very quickly in evidence for learning. As I said, our main audience and the people we care most about are school leaders and teachers. But to try and make their lives easier, we created a set of resources for parents to think about their role in the home learning environment. And so on our website, there's a dedicated area for parents and carers, and it sort of summarises what we know about learning principles that you can activate at home. And that's all the way from ideas like the things I've been talking about, as well as single page tip sheets for things that you might do, now probably more when you're on the weekend or you're thinking about how do I have good conversations about learning rather than what I always get, which is, did you have a good day at school? Yep. What did you learn? Not much. And then I get stuck. So there's a one-pager tip that would help you try and create some better conversations than those that I experience at home.
I don't know, Matt, what you're describing there, I'm thinking, I don't think that's just for kids either. I think we can be taking some of those principles broader than just the little ones and into our teams and potentially our partners and how was your day at work, dear? I think there's some good tips there that would traverse those boundaries.
We found that too. The tips for the 3 to 5 year olds are working pretty well on my 17-year-old doing her final year of schooling as well.
It's so interesting because, I mean, at the heart, isn't it, we're human beings. We had Andrew Grant on yesterday, and we were talking about creativity and in the workforce and business, and we talked about, why younger, kids are so resilient and creative and imaginative and what happens. So I just think there's so many great lessons here for all of us. Suzie, how can we learn more about SBA? How can we get more involved with the things that you're passionate about? And I just love your vision. Your vision is for transformations across education, employment, housing, and beyond that allow more people in Australia to thrive. Like, that's such a powerful vision. How can we do more, learn more, interact more with you and SBA?
Alex, thanks for the invitation. I think people in this network, as Matt said, have incredible influence and incredible insight into so many different parts of Australian society and so many different Australian businesses. There are so many different opportunities to support the charities that you know and love, to do the work that are set up to achieve impact and to achieve their purpose. So there's a little bit of background noise for me there.
Yeah, sorry, can you just fix that, please?
Thank you. So, for example, think about some of the areas that perhaps your business might be involved in. It might be lending to organisations. You might be lending to organisations who are going to build the social and affordable housing of the future that will help house people and will help drive economic growth. You might be part of a community that has young children who really need support to access high quality early child development services. And perhaps that might be something that you or your business or a community organisation that you're part of could support to make it easier, more affordable, safer, more attractive to participate in some of those things. And Alex, what you said before really struck me, that we're all human beings. I worry that some of the narrative in the media and from politicians makes it sound like we are all just an economy. And the whole reason why we want to get Australia moving again is not so that the businesses can be in operation. It's so that they can provide the goods and services that we all need, and so that we can enable all the people who live in our society to fulfill their potential and have a good life. And so those things are much broader than just the narrow definitions of GDP and profit and loss, and they matter immensely. So if you want to find out more about Social Ventures Australia, please visit our website, and we can put that in the chat.
Yes, please do.
We do a lot of different things. Matt runs an initiative that is largely philanthropically funded, and so we're always looking for philanthropic support. We use philanthropy to take risk, and we do that to demonstrate to government different approaches that we think can get better social outcomes, with the idea that government will then adopt things that work and scale them. So philanthropy is something we're always looking for. We are also investors. We're a funds management company. We have a financial services license. I'm sure many people in this network would be really familiar with that. And we make investments that we intend to get a financial return as well as a measurable social impact. And one of our visions is that measuring the social impact of investments will become more and more commonplace. Yeah. And this distinction between what is currently called impact investing and sort of mainstream investing over time will converge, and that distinction will blur. And so if you're part of one of those organizations, ask the questions. What are the ESG measures on this? Let's look at the environmental, the social, and the governance dimensions of our investments. So those are some of the things our team is doing, again, to demonstrate to industry, to government, what's possible when you think a bit differently. And then finally, we have a consulting team, and we do work on strategic planning, on monitoring and evaluation, on answering that really plaguing question of, am I having any impact? And so we do that kind of work absolutely with not-for-profit organisations, but we also do it with businesses. And probably we partner with a number of the businesses that are represented in your network today. And we do it for government departments on some of their programs as well. And I think the connection between the different perspectives that business, government, not-for-profits and philanthropy bring is so valuable, and I would really encourage people to learn about it if you're interested. Use your skills. That's always really, really valuable. If you have skills, use them when you're trying to make a social impact. And where possible, try and intertwine those things. Don't separate them into, this is when I'm doing good and this is when I'm doing my job. If it's possible to do your job and do good at the same time, well, that's perfect.
Yes, thank you so much, Susie. It's so thought-provoking, and I think you're right. We are humans, and one of the things that we're hearing from our community, and it's just, I feel like the pandemic and everything that that we're in and we've been through, and the Zooms and all that sort of stuff, it's highlighted. It hasn't. I don't think the things that were already there have just been amplified, I think, because we're feeling, more under duress and more separated and all these things. And one of the things that a lot of you amazing people in this community have been saying to us is, I feel a sense of isolation, or I'm on a roller coaster, or I'm really questioning, what my purpose is, or what my impact is, or what's next. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. I think all these things have been really big themes. And, I think, as you're saying, Susie, it's not, my work self and the rest of myself. It's not, when are we doing, it's that separation. We've got to integrate this, because we can do good and have a social impact and do profitable business. Like, that's not a new concept for a while, but I still think there's a bit of that divide, that, as you're saying, that sense that it's kind of this bucket and then this bucket, when actually it's the integration that's really
right. And Alex, if I can jump in and just offer a reflection on that. I was speaking to a recruiter who specialises in people, hiring people into not-for-profit organisations, and she said she's had more inbound interest than in her entire career from people who have taken a step back and paused and really thought about what they are doing. And one of the go-to concepts I've used for a long time, which I thought of when I heard this, is a Japanese concept called ikigai. And ikigai is the intersection of 4 different things. It's intersection of something that you love, something that you are good at, something that you can get paid for, and something that the world needs. And if you can achieve all of those 4 things, then that's your ikigai. And I think what we're going to see is more people looking for their ikigai at the moment, and not necessarily by working in a not-for-profit, but perhaps bringing a bit more of those other dimensions in your life into the work that you are already doing. So I love what you just said about the integration. I'm very hopeful. I don't think it will happen automatically, but I'm very hopeful that this will be a moment where more people experience more integration.
I love that. And can you just, so ikigai, how do you spell that, Susie? Because I know there'll be people here that will want to Google that.
It's IKIGAI, ikigai. And there's some beautiful images if you Google it on the internet.
That is so beautiful. I love it. And it goes really fast in these. So we're out of time, but thank you, Matt and Susie, for coming on. It's been a really, really thought-provoking session. And I know you've had a highly engaged audience here who've transfixed. I can see a lot of their faces. So thank you both for your time as well. And we really appreciate you coming on. And you've inspired me, Matt. I'm going to try a black and white filter tomorrow. Can you make that happen? I don't know how to do it, but I'm sure Cam will figure it out.
Alex, thank you so much for having us, and what you're doing here is brilliant. Bringing people together in these times are more important than ever before, and congratulations and thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you both for coming, and thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us again. Don't forget, we've got another awesome session tomorrow with Natasha. And of course, like I said before, if you haven't yet joined us, please do take us up on our offer. I know Cam has just put the link back in the chat. I've got a masterclass on at 2:00. If any of you want to join, there's a few places left. And of course, for our members, don't forget that you can register for Ross's masterclass on Friday at 12. It's not too late. Just go to our website to do that. So thank you, everyone. Love seeing you all, and see all your beautiful faces tomorrow at 12. See you then.